Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Sunoikis Digital Classics Summer Term 2021. Today is our seventh session of this term, and today we have our second session about reading and learning ancient Greek using digital tools. If you remember last week, we had a session about the same topic, but using a Pedalion, which is a rich set of tools for reading and learning ancient Greek developed by our colleagues in Leuven. And today we have this session about the same topic, but using other data and tools. In this case, we will see the Diorisis corpus and then Scaife viewer, the new reading environment of the Perseus project for reading and learning ancient Greek. Today, our guests are Alessandro Vatri from the University of Oxford, lecturer of classical and comparative philology, and James Tauber, who is the founder of Eldarion, a company developing complex web applications in the digital humanities, digital philology, and other fields, and including the Scaife viewer, this new reading environment of the Perseus project. As usual, you have the class outline in GitHub, so you have a description of this session with links and also readings that you can use, of course, for using these the Diorisis corpus and also for accessing the Scaife viewer. But now, so our guests are with us. So thank you, Alessandro and James, for joining us today for this session. And for our audience, so please ask your questions to the chat in YouTube, so we can see your questions, and then we will be able to answer your questions during the session or at the end, okay, of the presentations. Okay, but now I think we can start with Alessandro.
Thank you, Monica. Can you see the cover of my presentation?
Yes, now I can add your presentation. Okay, here we are.
Right, thank you, Monica. Thanks for the invitation. It's a real pleasure. So I'll start by describing very briefly the Diorisis Ancient Greek corpus and Diorisis Search, that is the desktop application that I produced to make it easier for researchers in classics in general or linguistics who don't have a specific training in IT or the digital humanities to access and use the corpus. So the corpus consists of 120 texts that cover a wide range, if not, well, more or less the whole of what we consider classical literature, Greek literature, at least from a chronological point of view. So you have Homer, of course, and texts that go all the way to the 5th century AD. The texts have been automatically lemmatized, and they are tagged for parts of speech, and each form in the text is also annotated with the possible morphological analysis if available. So what we used is the dictionary that was included in Diogenes, the desktop app developed by Professor Heslin in Leeds. So there's a very comprehensive word list with analysis there. And then we try to disambiguate the analysis using a part-of-speech tagger. The sources which we got our collection from are all freely available, open access resources. So the bulk of the corpus is based on the Perseus Canonical Greek Literature Repository, and then a handful of texts that are not included in the Perseus collection were sourced from another couple of digital libraries that are freely available online. So the corpus amounts to about 10 million words. So this table gives you an idea of the distribution of the sizes of the texts in words across literary genres. and across centuries. So as you can see, the 5th and 4th century, the literature, Greek literature from the 5th and 4th century is pretty well represented, and the imperial period is also relatively well represented. And well, if you want to ask anything about this slide, I think we can go back to it later during the discussion. Just a couple of things about the quality of the corpus. So one of the main problems we had to face, and everybody who is engaged in lemmatizing ancient Greek, is that roughly 1 out of 10 ancient Greek word forms may be analyzed as a form of more than one lemma. If one thinks about a word like praxeis, for instance, this can be analyzed as a form of prasso, the second person singular of the active future indicative, but it can also be analyzed as a form of the noun praxis, so it can be a nominative or an accusative plural. So we use tree-tagger to disambiguate cases like this, where the alternatives were and the alternative analysis pointed to different parts of speech. So if tree-tagger told us that a form like praxis was either a verb or a noun, this solved much of our problem. Then, of course, we wouldn't be able to disambiguate between nominative or accusative using this method. But, of course, things are not always as clear-cut as this. Well, of course, there's the limitations of the part-of-speech tagger itself that may create errors, but in some cases, the alternative lemmatizations involve the same part of speech. So a form like basileion, for instance. Well, this could be a form from a verb basileiao, the masculine or neuter nominative singular of the present participle, but it may also be the genitive plural of either basileia or basileia. So in this case, tree-tagger could only tell us or suggest us that this is a form of a noun or a verb. But if we got noun as an answer, then there's still a 50% chance that we might make the wrong guess. So we just have to guess the correct lemma from there. So the corpus, we calculated some confidence very roughly, so this way as regards the lemmatizations. Then we assessed the accuracy independently. We took a sample from Homer and a sample from Lysias, from texts that have been lemmatized by other researchers, and we used other lemmatizers to lemmatize the same samples, and we found that the accuracy of the Diorisis corpus, so we ran a blind test. So if you have a look at the article that I listed in the bibliography, was a blind test. 3 researchers evaluated the correctness of lemmatizations. We found that Diorisis gave us around 90% accuracy score for Homer and 97% score for Lysias, which is not bad, but of course it's not, the corpus itself is not perfect. So now I've recently released a new version of the corpus so I made some corrections manually based on the suggestions made through Diorisis search. So as I will show in a moment, I've implemented in the desktop application a way for users to report errors and suggest the right answer, or just report an error if they don't have an answer themselves. And I've also rerun some. Well, I've run another algorithm on the corpus, basically, since in the word list that we used for lemmatization before disambiguation through tree-tagger, there is some information in dialectal forms. I've included some metadata about the dialect, the prevailing dialect in the text in the corpus. Of course, there are texts that contain parts in different dialects. So for each text, I added some metadata with the dialects that one would expect to find in those texts, and added a layer of disambiguation based on dialect. So if there was a Doric form among the possible lemmatizations in a text where we don't expect Doric to come up, that form would be ranked lower in the possible correct lemmatization. And I've also tried to play a bit with frequency. If I look at all the possible lemmatizations of each form in the corpus and compile a list of which lemmatizations come up more frequently, this could help us select the right one. But this works well with inflected forms, but punishes indeclinable words that happen to be homophonous to inflected forms. So if we have, of course, if we have an inflected form of a noun or a verb, and overall inflected forms of that noun or the verb come up very often among the possible lemmatizations before the disambiguations, the score will be much higher than the score of let's say, an adverb that happens to be homophonous to any of these forms. So this could help, but it needs tweaking. So now the idea with new versions of the corpus and is keeping it up to date is that, well, thanks to the app, I'm able to incorporate suggestions and correct the corpus without, and I think it's much smoother to publish corrected versions of the text regularly, and even if it's about individual text, rather than republishing the whole corpus as a whole. So for researchers that don't use the app but use the corpus, I've published on my GitHub a script that checks for the latest version of the corpus. If, of course, they might want to use the most up-to-date corrected version of the text. And I've decided to use JSON as a format. It might be a bit idiosyncratic, and I'm be very interested in hearing what you think about this. Well, if only because it integrates pretty much natively with the app. With the app, as I will describe, is based on Electron, so it's all written in JavaScript, and I find it much easier to handle as a format than XML. But I'd be happy to hear your opinion on this. Right, so the app itself, so Diorisis Search, as I was just saying, is a desktop application built on the Electron Framework, which is basically a Chromium browser hidden from sight. So the advantage of this framework is that it's relatively easy to build cross-platform applications. So have a version for Mac OS, there's a version for Windows, and I'm trying to publish a decent version for Linux, but I don't have a good Linux machine myself. So I'm not sure if Linux users are too happy with the current state of the app for Linux. So the purpose of the app is basically to bring the corpus to the masses. The idea is that what I intended to do to make sure that all researchers and students in classics should be able to use digital resources, and in order to do so, they shouldn't be scared off by a steep learning curve when it comes to learning query languages or learning to script themselves. So the idea was to provide a user-friendly reader for the text, but above all to provide a tool to create and run complex queries in the most natural way I could think of, so using pretty much natural language. Right, I will demonstrate the app now, so let me know if you can see it now.
Yes, yes, we can.
All right, thank you. So yeah, this is the app. So once one loads the Diorisis corpus in it, what one sees on screen is a list of all the authors, including the corpus, and by clicking the name of each author, the available text for that author pop up. So the most basic thing one can do with the app is read any of these texts. So this works fine for prose text. So unfortunately, we didn't include formatting information in the corpus when we first produced it. So since the corpus was created for a computational linguistics project, we were, as it was on semantics, we were interested in the sentence as a context. So we removed all line breaks, and this is very unfortunate now if one wants to read drama or poetry. So all line breaks are absent. So I think it's better to have a look at a prose text, which looks a bit better. So one can read the text. Let's see if it, yeah, here it is. So this is Aristotle's Poetics. So yeah, one can just browse the text. It's a slider to move across the text, or one can just navigate the text using these buttons. One of the things one can do is to search for phrases. So very basic search for strings within the reader. So one can input the string to search either in Unicode, Polytonic Greek, or in Beta code. So if one searches for a word like tragodia, for instance, since we're looking at Aristotle's Poetics, so even without diacritics, using this simplified Beta code, one should be able to see, yeah, here it is, the results of the search directly in the text reader. So the result sentences are highlighted in the reader, and one can navigate from one result to the other within the text using these buttons up here. So if one clicks on any word in the text, click on tragodia itself, the analysis of the morphological analysis springs up. And if there's something wrong with the analysis, users may report it. So if we look at melee here, for instance, so this is analyzed as a form of melo, but it shouldn't. So this should be a dative of melos. So if one spots something of the kind, you can report the error, can rerun the parser on the form. Just hopefully it shouldn't take more than a few seconds. But it's taking a bit more than a few seconds. I think it's just loading the whole dictionary. Just give it another 5 seconds and you can just maybe dismiss it. Okay, well, oh, maybe something was there eventually. Let's see.
While it's doing that, can I just ask
Yeah,
a question
sure.
about this? When you're doing this analysis, is this reanalyzing the word from scratch, or is it retrieving a list of the possible analyses from before?
Well, it's basically just matching the form against the analysis from the word list. So it's the same thing as, oh, here we go. Same thing
Yep.
as Diogenes, if you're familiar with Diogenes, basically. It's precisely
So
the same.
it already has this list for the forms effectively. Yeah. It's not doing any actual analytical work.
No,
at that point.
No.
Yep.
Yeah, that's. So yes, so these are the possible analysis. So I guess here the right one should be this neuter dative singular. So yeah, one can just select it, and then this was just sent to the server where one can also download the app from. So
I'm sorry, Alessandro. Sorry, Alessandro.
Yeah.
Given that James asked the question, so going back to this, so basically, okay, when you click on a form, you get the part of speech. So if you go back to the melee was, or yes,
yeah.
Okay, so now we get these two possible analyses, and they are offered. What is the criterion? Because then you, for reporting errors, you get a complete list of other possibilities.
So this data is what is in the Diorisis corpus in the latest version, if one has the up-to-date files. So basically, yeah, when one clicks, there's no analysis being performed on the spot. So it's just reading from the Diorisis corpus files. So this is basically just a way to visualize what's there in the corpus. But of course, if the corpus is incorrect, yes, but the form is just matched on the word list from scratch, and then the user can disambiguate it manually.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this is also for our audience to clarify this. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Okay, so yes, so the idea, as I mentioned, so this is something that I think Perseus has been doing online quite a bit. Like one can vote for the correct analysis there. So I just thought I'd implement the same idea in the app, and yes, so periodically, like at least maybe every half year, I would go through the reports and make the corrections if the corrections are correct, of course. So the second step is not automatic. So in this case, well, since I'm maintaining the corpus, I'm the reviewer of the corrections. But of course, yes, whoever will maintain the corpus in the future will be able to should be able to access this kind of data. Right. So from back to the reader, other things that one can do here, and that's something that might be helpful for learners, is again something that an idea that is there in Perseus website as well. So one can retrieve the Perseus translation if available. So for this text, the translation is available. So it should take just a few seconds to connect to the server. Oh, here we go. So, of course, the way the data is structured in Perseus, as far as I understand, well, there are well, I retrieved the data from the smallest chunk of text that corresponds to the sentence with where the result is. So here, the chunk of text, the section of the Perseus text is much longer than the actual sentence, but the sentence itself is there. It should be somewhere here, yes, when tragedy and comedy are being talked about. So it's a bit experimental at this stage. I don't know if this can be improved, but I guess it can help readers who use the app. And the translations can be just copied to the clipboard from here if one needs to import it in any document one is producing. And sentences themselves can be copied. Well, the text of the sentence or the text plus the full reference or the reference alone. So this just amounts to the abbreviation of the text, the name, author and name of the text, and the location in the text. So if I copy the text and full reference, for instance, and then I open a text file. Maybe this is a bit small. So what one gets is the Greek text in Unicode and the author and work abbreviation. Though the abbreviations correspond to the those of the Diccionario Griego Español, that basically the same list as the LSJ, but it's been expanded. So I thought this could be a useful feature for people who would use this to extract examples or to just copy bits of text if they need to prepare a handout or prepare an article. And of course for people who would use this for teaching purposes in the classroom, if they need to print Greek to extract Greek text. Right. So yeah, this is what the reader can do. I think there is a bit more meat, and I think I'm running out of time, so just give me a shout if that's the case. So what I wanted to demonstrate is the search tool. I think that's where most of the meat is. So if I click on the text, I can just select a corpus of text for any for the queries, and can be any combination of text from any author, or so here I'm putting together, say, Aristotle's Poetics, the whole of Isocrates. And one can also select just a section of a text. So for instance, now I've added Thucydides to the corpus. If I want just, book one, there's this scroll bar in the wrong place. But anyway, let's say I want just a section of Isocrates' Philip. Oh, it's stuck, it looks like. Oh, well, here we go. So this is Thucydides, this is history. Or it's very slow. I think that perhaps sharing the screen is a bit demanding on my processor, but anyway. Okay, so this, whatever text this is, let's say if I want to search only from section 3 to section 14.9, I can restrict the selection to a subset of each work. So if one is working on only one book of Thucydides or one book of Herodotus, for instance, I think that could be helpful rather than running a search on the whole of a long text. And let's say I want to search for a specific construction. I can search for elements defined as simple strings or forms of a specific lemma, or I can search for phrases or for elements defined by their morphology. So let's say I want to find sentences which contain a a passive or immediate passive perfect combined with the dative of the first person pronoun. So I want the verb to be followed or preceded by a form of the lemma ego. And again, one here can type either in polytonic Greek or beta code with or without diacritics. I mean, for the exact lemma, one needs diacritics, but I've implemented a kind of corrector, like an orthographic suggestion tool, so one can search for ego. In the dative, and one can specify that ego must lie within no more than 4 tokens from the verb on either side. Okay, let's hope this will not take forever. It was much faster without a screen sharing going on, but yes, I should have tested it perhaps once the screen sharing was activated. Yes, perhaps I should have removed the CDDs as well. That's it's gonna take a bit. Yeah, let's remove a few texts. Okay, so this pattern was found in 23 sentences in these texts. So the results can be displayed either as a list where the texts are highlighted, and if one clicks on these texts, the results are loaded into the reader and can be navigated. Or the results can be displayed as a list of sentences. So there's the table with the number of occurrences, the frequency per 100 words, and the columns in this table can be sorted. Yeah, if you sort them by frequency, you see that this pattern that's a very raw frequency. Of course, no statistical testing here, but yes, it's rather frequent, rather more frequent in these texts of Isocrates than elsewhere. If one clicks on any of these texts, one scrolls down to the list of occurrences. So one can just go through this list of sentences if one needs to study a specific phenomenon or some collocation of a specific lexeme or whatever one wants to do. Again, all words are clickable, just like in the reader. Sentences can be copied, just like in the reader. And the results can be saved and reloaded into the app or exported as Excel files. One can select specific sentences for any need, and these sentences can then be visualized. So these are the sentences I selected from these results, and they can be exported into a Word file. So again, if one is selecting examples or passages for a handout or for classwork or anything of that kind, this should make things easy. And the other thing I wanted to show you that is connected to teaching and learning Greek directly is that one can use these sentences, select the sentence I've just selected, to build a parsing exercise. So one can paste the saved sentences into this tool that creates a parsing exercise, then the sentences can be parsed, and the teacher can provide the correct answer for each form in the sentence, and the exercise can be sent to students, and then they can load it into the app. They select the correct analysis for each form, and the exercise can then be sent back to the teacher and can be corrected automatically. Well, I'll show you in a second how this works. So once the sentences are loaded and passed, this is what the teacher sees. The teacher can just basically select the correct analysis here. For oimai, what the teacher would select first person singular of the present indicative of oiomai, for instance, so on and so forth. If none of the analysis is correct, the teacher can add the correct analysis. And if the lemma is not there in the dictionary, the teacher can choose to send to the server the correct lemmatization of a form. So this would be another way to expand the dictionary. So once this is done, and I've already prepared the file with an exercise to save time, the file can be sent to the student. The student can load it. Let's say, well, A. So every file is so the name is hard coded in the file in each file. So students can just pass around the answers and cheat. So what the student will see is something like this. So just the list of words in so the sentence, like we presented one word in its own box, and the student can answer the parsing exercise. Can start by typing a lemma, and there are suggestions for the Greek input, and then the student can answer. Can say that this is a verb. Well, can just put some random values just to give you an idea of how this works. Okay, so of course the analysis can be and further analysis can be added. So the analysis can be changed if need be. So once the student is done, the student can save the exercise. Oops. And send the file back to the teacher, and the teacher can just mark it. So the key should be loaded, and then the submission should be also loaded, and basically the parsing is checked automatically. And of course, the student did pretty badly on this sentence. So sorry if I'm rushing through this. It's just to give you an idea of possible classroom uses of this tool that I thought about. And of course, the parser is also available as a tool. One can just copy in any Greek text. So if a text is not available from the Diorisis corpus, one can just type in any Greek text, and this is also parsed automatically in the same way as it is in the teaching tool. And then the resulting text can be saved as a JSON file and reloaded into the search engine of the Diorisis corpus. So yes, this is how a text should be is presented. So if so this text is simply parsed by matching the forms against the word list. So there's no disambiguation going on here. One can just decide to save it as it is. And so there's no lemmatization going on here. I mean, there's all the possible lemmas are included in the result file. But otherwise, if one has the nerve, one can disambiguate every form manually. But either way, once this automatic or semi-automatic parsing is completed, one can save this text and load it into the app and perform any search as in the same way as the Diorisis Corpus files. So I think, yes, I'm a bit late, so I think I should leave the floor to James. So I apologize again if oops. It's been a bit rushed, but
no, Alessandro, no, don't worry. Yes, I think we have to move to James now, but anyway, so it was possible to follow you. And also there is a question in the chat about the documentation, but I put in the chat a link to Diorisis, and anyway, there are instructions, and there is a long description of these functions. Anyway, so we can go back to this question, and now I think I think we lost James.
Okay.
I don't see him.
No, he's dropped out. Hopefully he'll return.
Yes. So okay. Okay, James. I think we can. Okay. You are back.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So okay. Here it is.
Unmuting myself crashed Chrome for some reason. But I'm back.
Okay. No problem. Okay, here we are. Okay, James, please. So.
Okay. Well, I first of all want to thank Alessandro very much. I'm a huge fan of what he's doing. I'm a user of the Diorisis corpus myself, and I think it says a lot about the sort of state of digital classics that, you know, the Diorisis corpus is obviously built on a lot of the work that the Perseus Digital Library did, but he's added, he and Barbara have added a lot of stuff that now I'm able to take advantage of again. So there's this sort of wonderful network effect of all these open resources being available, people building on top of the work of others, which is really wonderful to see. And I love what you're doing, Alessandro. So I'm going to talk about the Scaife viewer now, which is the new reading environment for the Perseus Digital Library and beyond, as I'll talk about a little bit. So just to sort of give a little bit of an outline, I'll talk a little bit about the history and motivation of how the Scaife viewer came about. I'll give a bit of a tour in the form of screenshots of various features, talk a little bit about the background technology of how the texts get there in the first place, and I'll talk about some ongoing work that we're doing with a lot of new features, and finally how you can get involved. So the history of Scaife, I mean, most of you are probably familiar at some level with the Perseus Digital Library, which has been around for many decades now, predating the web. Even version 2 was on CD-ROM. It was only version 3 of the Perseus Digital Library that saw it move to the web. If you go to the main Perseus site now, what you're seeing is basically the version 4 of the Perseus Digital Library. And the Scaife viewer is really part of the vision for version 5 of the Perseus Digital Library. Although the Scaife viewer as a piece of software is also available for building other reading environments as well. Even though it's the focus at is on the Perseus Digital Library, as I'll talk about in a moment, it is being used for a bunch of other things as well. But the real motivation for building Scaife was a need to make it, first of all, much easier to add new texts to, and to build a more open and extensible platform. Version 4 of Perseus, which you see now, was developed 15 years ago. It's very difficult to add new texts to. So that was a big reason for building Scaife, particularly as part of the Open Greek and Latin project. There was a real desire to increase the scope of the corpus. And so we wanted a reading environment that could really take advantage of the new texts that are being digitized as part of the OGL effort. Okay, so let me. So I've talked about this already. The initial funding for developing the Scaife viewer was came from the Humboldt Chair of Digital Humanities at the University of Leipzig. It was developed by my company, Eldarian. It's all open source under an MIT license. And if you're wondering about the name, it was named after Ross Scaife, who was a pioneer in digital classics, taken from us far too early in 2008. And Scaife actually launched on the 10th year anniversary of his death in 2018. So this is the homepage that you'll go to if you go to scaife.perseus.org. I note down the bottom the stats that were there when I gave the talk here 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, there were 50 million words available in the Scaife viewer from the Perseus Digital Library, 20 million in Greek. That's now up to 30 million in Greek, and 68.4 million words in total. So it's a combination of Greek, Latin, translations of those works as well in a variety of different languages, English, French, German, and some other stuff as well. So the kind of entry point for the most part is to navigate this library. And this is similar in structure to some of the stuff that Alessandro was showing in terms of picking an author and then drilling down to individual works. And all of this is based around these CTS URNs, which provide a unique identifier for authors and works that's used throughout. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress, because this referencing scheme for authors and works and passages within in those works is crucial to the whole way that that Perseus and Scaife works in particular. So you can navigate down, through different authors and works and so on. You can also do full text searches. So it's possible to do searches and do things. Here I'm doing a search where I'm looking for the word love and the word Socrates appearing within 2 words of one another. And you can either get the individual passages shown with highlighting, or you can just get a list of all the various places that occurs. In this case, different search. This is doing a lemma search for phileo and getting all the hits. You can drill down and say, I just want to see Plato and see how many hits in each work of Plato, and then sort of navigate around that way. So there are really 2 ways of getting into a text, either navigating through the library or doing a text search, which can involve anything from searching for English words, searching for Greek or Latin words, and so on, including lemmatized search. Okay, so what does it actually look like once you drill down into reading? Well, even though, as you'll see in a moment, there's a lot of stuff you can bring up about the text, we wanted to also provide a very clean reading environment for when you just want to read the text. So if you were starting to read the Iliad, you could just view it in this mode with no other information on the sides, just the pure lines of text. But you can bring in the sidebars to start adding more and more information. And so what we've tended to do is on the left-hand side, put various widgets that are to do with navigating around different parts of the text or different texts. And on the right-hand side, information about what it is that you're looking at, whether it's the work as a whole, the passage that you're looking at, or even particular words that you've selected. So one of the widgets is a morphology widget, and we've selected the first word of the Iliad here, and so you actually get a lemmatization and parsing here. This is done dynamically. This is actually analyzed on the fly via a call to an API. Although as we get curated lemmatization and analyses, they can be used as well. And Diorisis obviously has a role to play in this as well. We also provide a sort of contextual word list of, with glosses. In this case, we've just selected one word, so it's just giving us a gloss for one word. Had we not selected one word, you'd actually get a list of glosses for the passage as a whole. Okay, just a couple of other things while I'm on here. Another example of something that where we've integrated information from an external source. The Center for Hellenic Studies has a commentary, the New Alexandria commentary, which they're building for a number of works. And what's really interesting about the commentary is they actually expose the commentary as an API. And you can query that API for with a passage reference and say, can you give me any commentary on this passage? And so we've used that for certain works like the Iliad. As you're on a passage, we can bring up relevant commentary that's coming from the New Alexandria commentary. I'll say a little bit more about those passage references and how they work in a moment. Some things that weren't on the previous screenshot, because the previous screenshot was a little old, some things we've recently added is pulling in all of the attribution data for who was responsible for the digitization of the text. And one of the exciting things that's been happening recently through the Open Greek and Latin project is a lot of students getting involved in digitizing texts that weren't previously digitized. And as students do that, their names will appear for all eternity in this attributions widget. The other thing we've added recently is this link back to the GitHub repository where the actual text is stored. So if there's errors found or whatever, you can click on report an issue with this passage and immediately create an issue for addressing that. Now, as well as looking at the Greek text, we also have the ability to bring up in parallel translations. This is just based purely on the reference scheme. So if you're looking at a particular set of line numbers in the Iliad, say, then we can bring up the corresponding set of line numbers in translations that we have. In this case, in English, but it could be in other languages as well if we have translations available for them, and we can look at those side by side. So just to say a little bit more about how the texts are coming in, we have the canonical Greek literature repository from the Perseus Digital Library, but the Open Greek and Latin project is also working on the first 1K of Greek pipeline, where we're digitizing new works, correcting the OCR with a wonderful tool from Bruce Robertson called LACE, doing the markup, putting it in GitHub, and then that can actually be brought into to Scaife. The only real requirements is that at the moment, this is changing a little bit, but most of the works that we're ingesting at the moment are in TEI XML and Epidoc specifically, and following the Capitans standards, which I'll come to in a moment. But I just want to say something about this referencing system, because it's really at the heart of a lot of what we're doing. And this is the CTS, the Canonical Text Services system of identifying passages. So basically, a passage of text is indicated with this particular URN, and what it consists of at the highest level is the CTS namespace, a work identifier indicating that it's Homer, the Iliad, for example, what particular edition of that text it is or translation. And then finally, this passage reference saying exactly what part of that edition of that work are you wanting to retrieve. And we make use of that all over the place, including interacting with things like the New Alexandria commentary that I showed you. It's a really great way of unambiguously identifying a passage. So I've said a little bit about this already, the texts that we're ingesting and the texts that are going into the first 1K of Greek or are in the Perseus canonical Greek literature are in TEI and Epidoc specifically. But they also follow a couple of additional requirements known as the Capitans requirements, and you can read about Capitans at capitans.org. But Capitans really adds two more requirements. One, a specific directory layout of what the files look like in GitHub, and some metadata around those. And also, so this is the directory structure that needs to be followed. But then crucially, how do you go from one of these passage references to the XML? So in this case, if you're wanting to get to 1.7 in the Iliad, how do you do that? Well, TEI has this concept of a refstexels that lets you basically, I won't get into the details, but basically lets you define a rule that tells you how to translate 1.7 into one of these XPath queries to navigate down into the TEI document. And that's exactly what Scaife is doing using the Capitans suite. Okay, so I'm going to talk in a moment about all the new stuff that we've been doing, but I just want to first of all say a little bit about some of the ongoing stuff that's happening, things that have happened since we launched back in 2018. We've done a number of additional projects beyond the initial funding that we've got, including an annotation interoperability project that we did with Johns Hopkins and Tufts, funded by Mellon. We're currently just finishing up an NEH grant called Beyond Translation that was really looking at ways of helping students engage with the text through rich resources. There's been other projects that are using or have used Scaife as well. The Digital Sira project, which was looking at early Islamic texts. And also Brill, the publisher, is using Scaife as the basis for their scholarly editions platform. So some of the new stuff that we're working on, or have been working on and continue to work on, things like images and audio, translation alignment, metrical information, syntax trees, and a bunch of other stuff that you can see there. And I'm going to show you rather than just talk to this slide. I'll give you some examples. So one of the first things that we've done is sentence alignment. You saw before when I showed you, we have the ability to say bring up a Greek text and an English text. But one of the challenges with that is that there's no alignment between the two. You know, we can bring up the first 25 lines of the Iliad in Greek and in English. Sometimes that's difficult, particularly with poetry, where there isn't a natural one-to-one correspondence. And so really what you want to do is finer grained alignment. You want to take advantage of annotations of translations that basically tell you in more detail what part of the Greek text maps to what part of the translation. And so one of the things we are now beginning to support is sentence level alignment. In this case, you know, basically saying this particular sentence of a translation maps to this particular sentence of Greek. But we also are supporting token level alignment. So the ability to map a particular word of Greek to a translation, or it may not be a one-to-one, it may be a many-to-many. So in the top half, you can see, you know, Aida is mapped to sing. It's a one-to-one correspondence here. But then in the lower half, you see the expression in the translation, the time when they first parted, is actually 4 separate words in Greek, and they're not even contiguous because of the day. So, you know, this is something that, you know, we don't necessarily have a ton of data yet. There's a lot of interesting things we can do in an automated or semi-automated fashion. But what we're doing in Scaife now is building out the infrastructure to be able to support the display of this kind of information, because we think this will be particularly useful for people wanting to engage with the text. So another thing that we worked on as part of the annotation interoperability work that we did with Johns Hopkins is incorporation of, for example, manuscript images, where any image really that's available via IIIF. And significantly, this again makes use of those CTS URNs, those identifiers for particular passages. What this whole system relies on is simply knowing that a particular image contains a particular passage, and those or particular passages, and those passages are identified with a CTS URN, and so we know, given the passage that you're looking at, what image to bring up. In this case, we're looking at the Venetus manuscript of the Iliad that was digitized as part of the Homer multitext project. Another thing that we've been working on is named entities. So where texts are annotated with people and places, we can make use of that information and display it inline in the reading environment. If they're geographical information, if it's geographical information, we can tie that to geographical location databases and so on, and do things like display maps like you see here. So in this case, this is an English translation that's been annotated of the catalogue of ships, and you can see where all the places correspond to. You can see, what the places are that have been mapped. You can select places and actually see exactly where they are on the map. Another thing we now support is audio and metrical annotation. So we took David Chamberlain's recitation of the Iliad and his markup of the metrical information, and you can go to any passage of the Iliad and listen to David Chamberlain recite it, and you can see the metrical information easily. And one of the big things that we're working on at the moment is syntax trees. And last week, I know there was a talk about Pedalion, and so this is actually an example from the Pedalion tree bank that we've brought in, where you can both get a text with interlinear information as well as the tree. You can select a token either in the interlinear view or the tree, and the corresponding things will be highlighted. You can decide whether you want to see the lemmas, the relationships that the word has with its head, and so on. This is another big thing that we're working on at the moment. I'll just mention that underlying all of the new work that we're doing is this server that we're building called Atlas, which stands for Aligned Text and Linguistic Annotation Server. And the idea here is to basically, this uses a GraphQL interface and basically lets you query the corpus, not only for particular passages that you want to retrieve, but also what information you want about those passages. So not only just give me the first 100 lines of the Iliad, but I want that annotated with part of speech and corpus frequency information. Or get me the first 11 lines of the Iliad with metrical information and audio. Or get me all the sentences in the first book of the Odyssey with Greek and English aligned with syntax trees of the Greek. These are the kinds of things that Atlas lets us query, and then the Scaife viewer can then display them to the audience. So just to say a little something about how it's all working under the covers, I've already mentioned Atlas, that's basically responsible for ingesting information and indexing it, and then making it available over GraphQL to the Scaife viewer. The Scaife viewer itself is built in a JavaScript framework called Vue.js. Atlas is built with Django. Now, at the moment, the vast majority of the texts that we're dealing with, coming from the Perseus Digital Library and the First One Code Greek, are in Capitan's compliant TEI XML. But we're also able to ingest other things as well, other forms of XML, CSV, JSON, W3C web annotations. Because the idea is we really want Scaife to be able to ingest a wide range of information keyed to the words in a text, whether that's audio and images, maps, commentaries, critical apparatus, tree banks, all the sorts of things that I've been showing. We're not trying to Scaife itself isn't trying to create any of that information, nor are we trying to be an editing environment. We're really just trying to bring together all of those resources that are being created by others, particularly where they're tied to texts through CTS URNs, and able to display them in a reading environment for particularly for students. So in terms of how to contribute and get involved in all this, I mean the Perseus instance of Scaife is at scaife.perseus.org. But if you're interested in the project itself and the development of the software, scaife-viewer.org is the homepage of the project. We have a newsletter that you can subscribe to, and you can look at all of the repos on GitHub. But it's really that first link that's probably the most important to note down. You can get to everything else from there. So I've rushed through that, but hopefully left plenty of time for questions. I guess not only for me, but also for Alessandro as well. So hopefully we can have a discussion as well between ourselves, and certainly invite any questions or feedback that other people listening live have.
Okay, so James, thank you very much. And yes, we have time, so of course we can discuss various things, because this session was very, very rich, because we have two wonderful tools, and so I'm sure there are many questions. So please, so we have a few comments in our chat. So originally, let me see through the chat. Yes, Usama was asking, from Stuttgart was asking, yes, well, there is documentation. Well, Alessandro, of course, you can answer this question, but there is a lot of documentation online, if I'm not wrong.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I try to provide as much guidance as possible, but I think it's very badly written because I rushed through writing that. But there is an in-app help. I don't know if you perhaps can I show it in the can I share the screen with my app? So just to
Yes,
check
okay.
if it answers the question. Can you see it?
Yes, yes, we can see your screen. Yes.
So yes, there's
okay, you can see. Okay, user guide.
Yes, and I will try and explain all the commands, and well, especially when it comes to what sort of queries one can build. Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful, but
well, I think so. I think this was the question, and definitely within the app, okay. So you have the possibility to, and I think that there is a detailed description, and then of course with the documentation we never end. I know, I know the problem, but I think this is definitely enough. Okay, Alessandro, thank you very much for this. Other questions or comments?
There was another semi-question in the chat, which was a bit of a back and forth between two different members of the audience. But there was this question about a Latin Diorisis. How, and I guess we can translate that question to how easy would it be to port Latin texts into your tool?
Well, I mean, it's all a matter of annotating them with the same schema, basically. So I guess that would be the main obstacle. But yes, of course, one of the things that one could do, and perhaps one should do, is to conform the annotation of each category to what is a bit more standard than what I found in the Diogenes files. So that yes, the search engine could search like a wider range of materials, and yeah, and also different materials in different languages if need be. But yeah, that's quite a bit of work. So I guess sooner or later.
But yes, so essentially, if you have Latin texts that are parsed and annotated in the same format as your Greek texts, then the tool would work for it as
yes, I guess in principle it should. I mean, of course, one of the things that one would need to tweak in the software as it is at the moment is that the search engine works on beta code, because I find it much more flexible when it comes to capitalizing or turning things to lowercase, or removing or turning grave accents to acute accents. It's much easier to work with beta code. So yes, if one were to work with on something written in the Latin script, yeah, there should be something to be tweaked. But yeah, it's feasible.
Yes, and then also for Latin, we have data in any case. So we have a part of speech, we have lemmatization. Of course, there are other complexities. And thanks for this note about beta code, because many times we mentioned this fact that it's easier to work with beta code, even if today we can represent at least classical Greek, not everything in Greek, but classical Greek, we can represent it with Unicode, but for many reasons is better. Well, it's better. Yes, it's easier to work with beta code, and we know the problems, for example, that we have with Greek when we have OCR text that many times, especially with capital letters, that they are represented as Latin, not as Greek. So yes, we know this issue.
Yeah, something that I've found as, I mean, I come from classics, and I mean, I consider myself a classicist more than a linguist or a computational linguist. But I think one of the sort of dilemmas in the field is of the digital classics is how much do we want to replicate how much is a digital edition meant to replicate the experience of reading a paper edition, and how much is it supposed to be efficient from a computational side, for the computational side. So I think, I mean, personally, I think it makes sense at this stage, with the stage of advancement of technology and the tools and the resources are amazing, to work on bridging this. So working on the interfaces, basically, because maybe, I don't know, that's the issue I found also with TEI XML, that might work very well for a certain type of approach to text, but maybe it's not that efficient when it comes to computation. So yeah, sorry, I'm just thinking.
No, exactly.
Aloud.
No. This is very important, and also with Greek, when we read Greek, which is correct, but in the end for the machine is not. So what is behind? We know that this is an issue. For example, with OCR text, we can read Greek, but then there are various issues, especially also with Unicode and for the machine. So we are not representing the same thing. So you're right. So this discussion about reading for user experience, but then for the machine.
Well, just on that point of replicating, whether we're trying too much to replicate the experience of reading in books, a good example of that came up in your presentation, Alessandro, which ties into the referencing schemes. So, one of the things you showed was, the difficulty in getting a fine-grained translation. So you had the large Aristotle, and what you got back for the translation was big. And the reason, of course, that it's big is because the standard citation schemes for a lot of these works are tied so much to the printed book, right? It's a lot easier in Homer or whatever to refer to an individual line number, but if you're referring to Plato or Aristotle via a Stephanus number or a Becker number, right? that's such a, I mean, it's so ingrained. I don't think definite numbers are going to go away anytime soon. But, you know, from one of the things that we're trying to do with a lot of the stuff we're doing in Scaife is, and I had a bullet point about it, I brushed over it, is sort of this idea of alternative citation schemes, alternative chunking. So you may want to view Plato via Stephanus numbers, but you may want to view it in terms of sentences or items of speech in a dialogue or whatever. And so which is helpful for us for things like tree banks and everything like that. You really don't want to navigate through Stephanus numbers. You want to navigate through sentences. And so one of the things we're trying to do more and more of is have these sorts of alternative ways of addressing the text. And I think that's relevant to what you were showing me, the translation stuff. You know, one of the things I would love Scaife to be able to do for you is, or not necessarily Scaife, but the larger ecosystem, is have those fine-grained translation alignments so that you can bring up something that's closer to what you're wanting to look up.
Definitely. On that point, one of the problems I had when I was trying to figure out how to align the reader with the Perseus resources is that I could find the catalog, so with the URNs of the relevant English translations, but couldn't find much information as to how the resources were structured internally. So if I had to look up sections, pages, or lines, or I don't know, maybe I just couldn't find it, but it would be very helpful to have some, you know, detailed catalogs with all this information.
Yep.
Well, thank you for this discussion, because this is very important. Just a few notes for our audience, especially for the students, because before, when Alessandro was showing Diorisis, we could see, an example with a sentence. And there we have a sentence splitting based on punctuation, usually. This is a note for especially for our students, because this is a technical discussion, but this is fundamental to represent historical text in a digital environment. So we have two levels here. One, to use sentence splitting, and so we can visualize this text by sentences, and sentence splitting is done using punctuation. And punctuation is something that is added in critical edition. So we have a second level, because in ancient times we didn't have a punctuation. So this is a method, for showing for sentence splitting. Then we have another level, which is the level of the structure of our ancient sources, again in modern editions, and this is based usually. The structure is based on books, chapters, paragraphs for prose text, or lines for poetry, etc. And in this case, there is a long tradition for structuring these works. And in a computational environment, the effort is to preserve both. So we can have sentence splitting, but on the other side, like in the Scaife viewer, we keep this structure, but there are many complexities. And James was mentioning Stephanus pages, which is this system of structuring or referring to sources. And this system is based on pages of printed editions of classical sources, like for Aristotle, for Plato, and for other sources. The problem is that those systems are not very precise, especially for a computational purpose, because there are many situations where it's not clear where a paragraph begins and ends, because they are based on pages of printed editions. And there are situations where we are lucky, like for Athenaeus of Naucratis. I know that because I'm working on this author, where we have two systems in our tradition, based the system of Casaubon, and which is based on printed pages, and the system by Keibel, which is a system based on chapters and paragraphs. And so we have fixed paragraphs. We know the beginning and the end of each paragraph. So the effort here we have examples in Diorisis for translations, exactly. So we have a single sentence within a longer section, a Stephanos page, and then in the Scaife viewer, we have those CTS URLs trying to represent these complexities, okay? We have a long tradition, we have ancient text, then we have a structure of those texts based on the work of philologists in the centuries. Then we have modern editions with different critical editions with different systems. And now we have computational needs, because for the machine, of course, we need stable identifiers, but also precise way of referring to these texts. For example, Stephanos pages can be problematic because they are based on printed editions, and possibly they are not based on punctuation, and so there are situations where we are not sure where a certain section begins. And I tried to summarize very complex problems, but these are interesting things, and there is a lot of effort today in trying to represent these complexities in our environments. Okay, so we have Helmadik. So thank you for joining us. I see a comment in the chat.
Or a request, yes.
A request, yes, a request.
I mean, it's not something I can necessarily do anything about. I can pass along the request, Elma. But yeah, you know, we obviously, the Perseus for the longest time, including up to Perseus 4, did not use these CTS URNs. It had other ways of addressing things, and the move to using CTS URNs has only been happening in the last few years. CTS, the Canonical Text Services, and the Site framework came out of the Homo Multitext project. Neil Smith and Chris Blackwell developed it initially for the Homo Multitext project, but you know, it's now has widespread use within Open Greek and Latin, and obviously Scaife is making big use of it. But yeah, I mean, there's also not only the older Perseus stuff, but also just, you know, Alessandro, you gave an example of the citation of the Aristotle Poetics. You know, there's a need to be able to handle those kind of human citations as well, right? If somebody, you know, if you come across an ill 1.100 or even, you know, alpha 100, if you're using that system, you know, to refer to the Iliad, you want to be able to map those to CTS URNs in many cases as well.
So I'm not sure.
Helma's made a comment about Latin as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Does this partially impact on the question that we were discussing with Alessandro about getting Latin into Diorisis? Because would that
I think so.
be a source of Latin? So the Chicago Paris Latin.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, the as you were saying, like the Latin material is there. So of course, something would need to be done at the Diorisis app end of things to make it able to read the data and work on it.
So there are many requests for, yeah, please, Gabby.
So no, I had a sort of a follow-up question to the discussion of should these digital reading environments, search environments, editing environments try to reflect the experience of using a book, printed editions, which is sort of a have been in the habit, or certainly this was the case 10 years ago. I would like to think this has changed, but I bet for a lot of people it hasn't. Of using a digital resource to find the source of the text and then to cite the print book in their article, and never mention Perseus in their footnote, or never mention the TLG in their footnote, even if it's the text they've copied and pasted from there. The assumption being that we all can automatically and effortlessly find the exact citation we're looking for by pulling the Tauber or whatever off the bookshelf in the library, find it, copy it out, put it back, and that no other tool has ever been involved. And these tools make an impact on what we're doing. If you say there are 6 instances of this in classical Greek corpus, you have to say where you got that information from, because TLG might say there's 6 instances, Perseus might say there's 7 instances, because they're parsing it differently. So that's. So I wonder. I mean, that's. Sorry, there was a question behind that, which is to what degree do you think this is still true with your tools in particular, and does it bother you? Is there something we could do to make it impossible not to cite Diorisis or the Scaife viewer as the source of this? So that's 3 questions.
Who wants to go first?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, citing something like the CTS URNs is more important than citing Scaife in particular, because that's what links to everything else. Then it doesn't really matter if somebody's viewing it via Scaife or some other tool. If we have these machine actionable citation schemes, I think that's the most important thing.
Unless the text they get through Scaife is an edition itself. It is not a 100% reflection of a particular print version. If at any point there's danger that might be different, then you have to cite that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's relevant to especially the work that the Open Greek and Latin project is doing with the first 1K of Greek. I mean, yes, that starts off often with digitizations of editions, but there's definitely a sense in which there's an editorial work being done, whether it's by students or whoever, that deserves to be credited. I guess that's the other aspect of it. It isn't just about the CTS URN. It's about crediting the students that or whoever that did the work of getting it digitized and correcting it and everything. Alessandro, do you have anything you want to?
Well, yeah, I mean, on this note, so I added it to the pop-up window when the results come up in the app, that if one wishes to use these results in a publication, it would be nice to cite the article Barbara and I wrote to present the corpus. So it is also true that most of the time one would use these resources just as a starting point, and that I mean, I think it's good practice would recommend checking all the most up-to-date editions, because of course a lot of the digital texts, including those behind the paywall, are very obsolete by now. So yes, I mean, I wonder how many scholars would only use a digital resource as they exist now and just copy paste from that. Of course, if somebody does some large like corpus study, some big quantitative study, then of course it is crucial that they cite the resource. And yes, as to your initial question, when we're talking about like how much the experience would need to replicate the experience of reading a book, well, I find like an environment like Scaife is really excellent for what I see, because it is very familiar, but it's a enriched environment, so it builds on the experience of having a hard copy. So but the only point I wanted to make here is that I think it is crucial that well, it is good that we replicate the reading experience, but it is crucial that we shouldn't be forced to represent the data according to that model. So it's again a matter of interface.
Thank you.
Yes, I think this is important because Diorisis and Scaife, they are not just reading environments. They are, of course, we can read text through these tools, but they are much more than that. And definitely we can copy and paste text. I do that, yes, of course, because when I need a passage, I do that today for my students, for my classes, for my papers, for my books, etc. But they are much more than that, and this is the problem. Okay, many times those tools are not cited because, oh, I want to refer to traditional editions because they are correct, and if there are mistakes in these corpora and these tools, I don't want to mention these problems, these mistakes. But these mistakes are due to the fact that there are many philological complexities, textual complexities that today the community is trying to solve. So we have mistakes because, okay, today we know that the machine can't read ancient Greek perfectly well, but we have mistakes also in printed edition. So
I was going to say, printed books can have mistakes too.
Exactly. We know that because we are going through so much data that we know that we can say that. But there are so many complexities, CTS URIs, lemmatization, part of speech. There are many philological questions behind those things. So this is the reason why these tools are not just reading environments, or at least it's not just reading text from the beginning to the end, but analyzing in a critical way these text. For example, lemmatization is a wonderful example. So there are so many complexities, but also CTS URIs to represent the structure of traditional philology is very complex. And today we can produce new citations thanks to the machine. We have new needs and new problems. So,
yeah. I mean,
yes, Gabby.
I mean, just on that. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say on this point of, there are mistakes in print as well, is that the process of digitizing, and I know this was true for the TLG, and it's almost certainly true for Perseus, which is the source of a lot of the text in both Diorisis and the Scaife viewer. When you digitize a text, because you know errors can creep in through the digitization process, whether it's OCR or whether it's being double keyed or whatever, you do a checking stage, right? To look, and some of that's manually checking, and some of that's computationally checking, statistically checking. And among finding errors of digitization, you also find errors in the print version. And certainly when I worked at the TLG, we fixed some of those errors. If we thought the editor was wrong, we didn't touch it. We were encoding that edition. But if we thought the editor had made a typo, we fixed it. There's one text. It's a 50-page Byzantine text that I found 600 typos in. And so the online text in the TLG, which is less trustworthy than print, as we've been saying, is better than the canonical print edition of that text, to the tune of 600 typos corrected. And maybe one or two errors crept in as well, and maybe a few typos went past that I didn't correct. But nevertheless, the text can be a lot better. And just to sort of the flip side of that, to further the argument that the non-citation of these digital sources is more of an emotional thing for classicists than it is a rational thing. The same issue of people using the digital resource to find the text and then citing the print resource happens with papyri.info, which is explicitly a site that contains many editorial revisions and even new texts that are not in print. And so people cite, they go back and cite an obsolete text when the new text is the one they've actually looked at. And that to me says it all. Sorry, James, I preempted you.
No. I can't remember what I was going to say, but that was, your points are excellent to end on. I know we're sort of at time, but yeah, no, that was great.
Oh, thank you for this discussion. Unfortunately, our time is over, but just one thing for James, because we mentioned this last week. So I'm very happy to see these new things in the Scaife viewer, including images of manuscripts, but also audios. We discussed that last week when presenting Pedalion, and there were students in the chat asking, can we have this experience? We would like not only to read real Greek or Latin, but also to hear that, which is a problem because, of course, what do we mean by listening to ancient Greek? So, what is this is my last question. So, what is the goal of these audio experiments? This is for metrics, for.
I mean, we're really just trying to bring in resources that other people are creating, integrating them together in the service of people that want to better understand the text, particularly students. I mean, it's really about people that need a certain amount of scaffolding, or they want some additional engagement with the text. Maybe they want to engage with the text, that they're not quite at the level of the language yet that they need to be. So they, these extra resources are helpful. So the more people that create resources that are tied to the referencing schemes. I mean, the reason the audio works is because we had time codes in the audio already mapped to individual lines of the Iliad. That wouldn't be possible if we just bought a CD of somebody reciting. Wouldn't be possible. It's because it was built around this kind of machine actionable citation forms. The more data that people produce that works that way, the more in an open, open formats and open licenses, the more we can bring all this together in things like the Scaife.
Okay, yes, thank you. And this note is important, of course. These audios mapped on the text, again, with the structure of the text, in this case, poetry, each line, because we can align the audio to each line. So this is important. So unfortunately, now we have to stop. I'm very sorry because this conversation is super interesting, but yes.
Really require an answer. It's more a request than anything. Are we planning to add a couple of suggested exercises to the session page that students can try out both the Diorisis search and the Scaife viewer? Just some. I mean, they can go in and just play with it, of course, but to give them something to work through. I think that would be very useful for students. Thank you.
Yep, I can definitely do that. Yep.
Okay, excellent. Yes, just two examples for Diorisis and for the Scaife viewer. Okay, thank you very much for this very, very interesting session. Again, so you have links in the class outline in GitHub. There is a lot of documentation. You can use these tools, and then you can also, if I can say that, ask questions to Alessandro and James. So you can reach them for other questions. And definitely, we will have other sessions discussing other problems. Today, we have seen many interesting philological things emerging from this session. But now is over. So next week we will move to another topic, which is onomastics and prosopography, how to represent onomastics and prosopography in a digital environment. We will have Trismegistos people, and then the following week we will talk about name entity recognition, and then we will move again, keeping textual annotations to geo annotations. But now our time is really over. So thank you, Alessandro. Thank you, James, for joining us today for this wonderful session.
Thank you
for your work. We have many requests, we have many dreams, but anyway, we will see. So maybe next term we will have another session about this. So really, thank you very much, and thank you also to our audience for participating in the session, for asking your questions. Okay, so see you next week, and good night for those of you who are in our time zones. Otherwise, good day, good morning, etc. Okay. Okay, bye.
Okay.
See you. Ciao.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye bye.